Welcome back to the somewhat new studio. I'd love to get you guys' opinion on this setup. The only thing I'm not super happy about is the lighting, which I'm sure we'll be able to fix at some point. But for more than one reason, I'm going to have to film in the gun room from now on. So what I have for you guys today is something that's very, very interesting. This is a company called A3 Tactical, and they make something called the Triad. And this is pretty much a chassis system that turns your piston AR-15 into a bullpup system. Now, for those of you who've done testing on bullpups before or just done research on bullpups before, it is a very known thing that there are two primary issues when it comes to the bullpup system. The first issue is going to be that the trigger is absolute trash, and the second thing is going to be that bullpups are known to not really be accurate rifles. You're often going to be around the 3, maybe 4 MOA expectancy when it comes to accuracy out of a bullpup system. Now, what makes this interesting is that since this is using a standard AR-15 upper for the actual function of the firearm, then there's a good chance that this might be able to kind of change up the accuracy performance because you're using AR-15 primary components as opposed to dedicated systems that are going to be used for the bullpup system. And we're going to get into the lower and talk about how this might change the trigger system as well to give you a better idea of how this is going to work. Now, since there are two different things we're speaking about, the lower and the upper receiver, which are two entirely different things, I first want to speak about the upper. Now, I did make a video on this upper. Again, this is the BRN-180, the new Gen 3, I believe, of the BRN-180, and it came out with a lot of really cool features that make this very unique. Now, a few of you pointed out that when you were watching the original review of the BRN-180, that it did seem to have a lot of malfunctions and it wasn't cycling correctly. And you guys were absolutely right. There seems to be some kind of issue with the gas system that's on the front. Now, the way that it comes from the factory now is that there's a new toolless system that allows you to switch between 3 different settings, whether it be like adverse, standard, and suppressor options, which gives you a good variety of options that you're able to use depending on what you're or how you're going to set up your rifle. Now, I reached out to Brownells to ask them about the issues I was having. They said it seems like a few people had that issue, but it wasn't a problem at all. They sent me a new upper receiver and it now functions flawlessly. I had no malfunctions since I started using the new upper that they sent out. So it seems like every now and then there might be one that could have an issue. So obviously I always run through a minimum of 300 rounds to ensure the proper function of the rifle. And then beyond that, it should be good to go. But again, I'm going to do continuous testing to really make sure I can be confident with this setup. But again, as of right now, I haven't had any new issues coming up. So it seems to be good. So I was told when I got this that the compensator that was at the front was going to be a compensator, not a flash hider. After speaking to a few people, it seems like there's a debate of whether it's going to be a flash hider or a compensator. So what I would recommend is if you live in a restricted state, somewhere that you might run into issues if you have a flash hider, it might be worth switching it out. I switched out my compensator to the Lantac Dragon, and it is a fantastic functioning piece. It really allows for much better compensation for the rifle, and it really made the whole shooting experience with this rifle significantly better. So I think that's a great option. There are a few options on the market, but this one seemed to work really well. Remember also that when you're turning it into a bullpup system, you need to meet the legal requirements in overall length to allow this to still be considered a rifle. So whichever compensator you switch it out for, again, make sure that you're following regulation so that you don't run into any problems yourself. So again, the upper receiver, other than that, is going to be the standard upper receiver that we spoke about from Brownells. So I'd recommend you check out that video if you want to get more information on how that actually works. So far, it's working very nicely. Now, since we're turning this into a bullpup system, there are a few things that you have to consider now. This optic that I'm using, this is the Holosun 515 GM. It is pretty much my favorite rifle optic at the moment, and I'm using a Reptilia 1.93 riser. Now, for me, 1.93 has become the kind of the gold standard for me when it comes to AR-15. It really allows you to get a proper cheek weld on the rifle and brings the optic a little bit more up, so you're not like straining your neck as much. And ever since switching to that, it's really been my standard. Since you're using a bullpup, things are going to be riding just a little bit lower. So even for me, this is feeling more like an absolute co-witness than a 193, which means I know that A3 on their website sells like a riser themselves, that you could add the riser and then put the optic on top of that. So that could be something that you could consider if you wanted to be a little bit higher up. For me, the 193 is still okay. Like, it's fine. I might want to get a little bit of a riser just to get a little bit more of a comfortable cheek weld. But at the moment, again, it does work fine, but it's something that you want to consider that you will be a little bit lower since kind of things are moved down just a little bit. Now, the other thing that's going to be brought to you by A3, so when you purchase this lower chassis system, is that they add this rubber guard that pretty much goes over the rail area. Again, you have to remember that this is, again, a standard AR-15 upper. So there's a pin over here and there's a pin over here, right? Those are going to be your 2 pins for your regular takedown. But again, it moved the whole AR-15 upper all the way back. So it's a very, very cool idea that, again, you're just taking a piston upper and moving it to the back. But what that means is that this is your primary, what used to be your primary rail area. So they give you this like rubber guard that covers it, so it allows for a proper cheek weld without rubbing against your face, and it makes it a much better, obviously more comfortable way to be able to fire it. I did try without it just out of curiosity, and obviously during recoil you'll feel the rail rub against your face, so it might be something that you'd want to, well, it comes with a kit, so you're going to probably replace that anyway. It just goes on top and covers that rail area, allowing it to be an area that you could be able to use a regular cheek weld. Now, let's talk about the lower. The lower is obviously where all the beauty happens. Now, they were very creative about the way that they designed this, where they wanted this to be able to be something that could ship directly to your door. So anyone who's thinking right now would be asking, so how is this a serialized part? Because this obviously is the lower receiver, so how does that function? So the way that they designed it is that you have to use a little bit of your imagination over here. But right over here, this whole area, this looks like a lower receiver, right? That looks like a standard lower receiver. So on the inside of this chassis system is going to be a lower receiver that you add yourself. So you buy your own stripped lower receiver, a standard mil-spec, nothing's fancy, regular lower receiver. They have a website, a video you're able to follow on YouTube of how to install all the components here. So you see a lot of the functions are regular functions of an AR, but it's going to be slightly different because we make a few modifications to allow it to function in that way. So you can see over here on the back portion, there's going to be a QD slot that you could add a sling. You could also add a sling to the bottom based on your preference, right? This is going to be your standard right over here. Let's see if it focuses. Right over here is going to be your standard like ping pong paddle for your the lock of the actual rifle, right? So using your imagination, right on the inside over here, this is actually a standard low receiver, and all these other stuff are added to it to allow it to be a functional rifle, which again is kind of using the system where they're able to ship you the lower receiver straight to your door because it's not a serialized part. You add your own serialized part. So just take into account, you'll get a cheap, like the cheapest lower receiver you're able to find because all of them pretty much work fine, and you add it to your own system, which then allows it to have a serial number and be compatible with the rest of the rifle. Now, what's really interesting, right, is because now that you see that here is where the lower receiver is, you might be asking where the trigger is or how the trigger functions. So here's the trigger, right? So this is the trigger that comes from the factory, obviously, and it includes in the kit a Rise Armament competition flat face trigger. I believe it's a flat face trigger. And what it does is that when you pull the trigger over here, it actually has a bar that goes around the inside and then it attaches to the trigger that's on the inside over there. Now, what's cool about this concept, again, is one of the issues with bullpups is that they're usually known to have pretty horrible triggers. So I'll do a quick trigger pull for you. Let me actually take off the sling so it doesn't get in the way of the camera, and I'm gonna try to show you a little bit closer up. So right now, I'll rack it. I'll do a trigger press and you might be able to hear it in the audio. And right now it's on safe, so that's fantastic. Standard AR-15 safety selector. So let me touch the trigger. That's all the wiggle you got right over there. Trigger went off. I'm gonna hold it down, rack it again so you guys could see the reset right there, and fires again. It is really nice. So now the idea is that they've pretty much allowed you to choose any type of trigger that you want on the internal portion that allows the rest of the rifle to function in that way. Now, the reason why that's cool is that you could get like a Geissele single stage precision trigger, which happens to be one of my favorite triggers that I have right over here, right? It's gonna be a Geissele flat face trigger. You could choose whatever type of competition flat face trigger or whatever trigger you want, put it on the inside, and it will enhance the performance of the rifle and allow you to have a better overall accuracy as well as just better trigger press, because ultimately it is using the trigger that you put inside as the primary. It's going to replicate whatever's happening in the back, so it works as one singular system, but you could choose the trigger that you want. The only downside to that, which I'm sure some of you might be thinking about, is that you are obviously adding more internal components, unlike, let's say, a standard built like Tavor or any kind of the bullpups that are on the market. It's a one system trigger system. So right now you have two with this system that allows you to do that. So it is something worth considering. The grip that comes from A3 is a really, really nice grip, texturing all along the edge. And then you see right above that, we have the standard AR-15 safety selector. It is ambidextrous, so you have that on both sides that you're able to actuate based on your preference, and it does not get in the way, which is very nice as well. Something, again, as a side note that I mentioned when I was making the BRN-180 video, the rail system that Brownells put makes it very difficult to be able to add a flashlight onto this rail, because when I point it, if you could see if we do a close-up over here, right over here, if you look at the rail portion, not at the actual barrel, you see that there are two lips that stick out of the M-lock right over there. Now, the problem with that is those two lips right over there don't allow the standard M-lock. When you twist the piece into place, it's no longer contacting a full 90-degree angle, because there's kind of like those lips that stick out that don't allow it to actually go in place. So I tried a few different ways, I tried a few different mounts, and it didn't seem to work for me. So what I ended up doing is I went to get a neutral flashlight holder from Monstrum Tactical. You're able to get them off Amazon, and that's what this guy is right over here. And what that is that you could take any kind of like EDC light that you have, put it into the neutral fitting mount, and then that just attaches to the top rail right over there, which will allow you to use the flashlight. So for me, a lot of my rifles, I've kind of switched over to not using wires, because if you're able to get away with it, I'd prefer not to need to have additional areas where there's just going to be stuff that have to be reorganized and redone. So for me, when I aim the rifle out, I'm in a tight space over here, but when I aim the rifle out, my thumb on this side is able to just touch the light itself, and I'm able to actually activate the light with my thumb. And since you're using a bullpup system, it actually works really well. Another cool thing, which is, again, it's already known about the bullpup system, is that this barrel length that I'm using right now is overall length is 16 inches with a pin and welded muzzle device. The actual barrel length, I believe, is 13.9, but then again, with a muzzle brake, it completes the 16 inches with the overall length of this rifle being just over 26, which makes it legally a rifle. Now, what's cool is that, again, this is going to be a 16-inch barrel. Now, what's cool is this guy, this is my 10.5-inch rifle, right? So this is the BRN Gen 2, and you can see this is a rifle I've been using for home defense for a long time. I made a video on this as well. It is a very, very, very nice rifle. And again, a lot of new features coming from this guy than from this guy. But what's really cool about this is if I do a side-by-side for you, you could actually see that even in the most collapsed position of the stock, the brace of the pistol or the other of the 10.5 inch, this comes in shorter. With a 16-inch barrel, the overall length on this guy is still shorter than a 10.5 inch barrel. So you're really getting a way more compact system, much better velocities because you have a full 16-inch barrel. I could actually go to an 18-inch length overall, and I might just start getting into the area of being around the same, maybe just slightly longer, maybe, but that's going to be with an 18-inch barrel. So that's crazy to actually see. Obviously, this is the whole idea of the way bullpups were designed, is that you move everything towards the back to allow you to have more barrel length in a more compact system, and it really functions nicely. Small detail that I wanted to add, these A3 Triad systems, these chassis you're able to get for the piston uppers, do work with a few different brands to my knowledge. This one is specifically designed for the Brownells BRN-180. Now, the side thing is that some of the brands offer a charging system on the front as opposed to the back. I still prefer the one in the back. The only small detail I'd want to mention is that if you're a bearded individual and you have your face over here and you need a racket, right? Obviously, for most of us, we're gonna have to move our face because it goes right into the line of where we are. But also, just be aware that your beard could get caught kind of in the little recess area over here. So if I bring this up without touching all the microphones. So they have this like little rubber gasket over here that, or not gasket, just the rubber railing over here that allows for the charging handle to go back and forth. So this area is just something you want to watch out for because your face could get stuck into that. Remember also, this is a non-reciprocating charging handle. All the action happens on this side. You can see with the reciprocating and closed dust cover, which I love that design that they actually put into the rifle. Again, if I pull up the other rifle, this guy right over here has a dust cover, but you actually have to, you manually close it like that. And then when you rack it, obviously it opens up. But again, it's during firing, you actually see that the area remains open. You can actually even see into the trigger guard area right over there, which is definitely, it's not a preference, but it functions fine. I've never had an issue with this, and I really, really love this rifle. It is still currently my home defense rifle, and it works great. What I would say is that if you're interested in a system like this, I'll leave a link for the information down below. It requires 3 different things. It requires the chassis system, which you would buy from A3 Tactical. It requires the upper receiver, which I'd recommend the one from the Brownells, which I really think their Gen 3s are fantastic and they work really nicely. Always double check, oil it properly, make sure it's functioning. But again, for me right now, it is working beautifully, and I'm going to give you guys an update in the future as I put a few thousand more rounds through it to make sure it functions well. So you'll need the upper receiver from Brownells, you'll need the lower receiver, it's going to be the A3 Tactical, and the last thing again you'll need, just to remember, is you're going to need the lower receiver that you'll purchase separately, and that will go as a stripped standard lower receiver. Don't get anything fancy, right? But you'll see that's the magwell area over there. that you'll be able to get the magazine into, and that's where the low receiver goes to be able to allow it to function. So I think this is a very, very fun system. I'm not perfect on it yet because I want to get more testing behind it, really make sure I'm comfortable with it. But the overall length of this being just in the rifle category, which makes it avoid legalities and all that other kind of stuff. The fact that you have a 16-inch barrel while still getting a more compact system than my current 10.5-inch, which is being used for home defense, which means you get significantly better velocities. All the ergonomics of this, I think, were really well designed, where you get a lot of comfort in the way that you're going to hold the rifle. Having the button that you could activate the light without the need of wires, again, is something that I prefer. And I'm using a very minimalistic kind of sling that really works for this, because it seems like since the balance of the rifle is all the way in the back, since it's a bullpup, it does actually function very, very nicely and has been something I definitely enjoyed. So I'm going to do, again, more testing in the future. If you have any questions about this rifle or things you'd like me to test, maybe we could do a side-by-side accuracy test with this rifle. Maybe I could grab a Tavor that we could use as a comparison just to get an idea of the performance we could expect out of both of these rifles and see how they do. Or any other questions you might have on the system, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. This is Raziel Cohen with the tacticalrabbi.com. Thank you for watching.